Thinking of coming to Australia as a doctor, a GP, or maybe a specialist? Well, not until you've considered these. Hello everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Katie. Here on my channel I seek to empower, educate and promote well-being. Welcome. So, a little bit about myself. I am a general practitioner or GP, or how some would refer to it as a family doctor. I am a UK trained family doctor who moved from the United Kingdom to Australia in 2020. So I get a lot of people asking me, a lot of friends that I left back in the UK ask me about what it's like to come to Australia and be a doctor, be a GP out here. And I've spoken to other people, other doctors from other specialty, and I've told them about my experience of moving out here as a doctor from the UK. And so I felt that if they had those questions and if they wanted to talk to me about my experience, then maybe they would there would definitely be a lot more people out there who want to know about what it's like, you know, the journey and things that they need to consider before they decide to make that jump and come over to Australia to practice medicine in their different field. However, I can be a bit more specific about being a general practitioner because that's my area of specialty. So, the first thing to say, a disclaimer, is that if you come out here as a GP, you are essentially a contractor. Whether you're working for a small independent firm or you're working for a big corporate, you are a contractor. You will be a contractor. So some things to put in mind is, you know, your taxes. Don't forget your taxes, how you're going to do them, and yes, because you're not employed, you're going to be responsible for making sure that goes through. Okay, so yes, so that's the disclaimer. You will be a contractor. The first thing I would say is that you have to consider whether you are being given an offer by a corporate, like a big general practitioner firm where they have several practices in Queensland, in Victoria, New South Wales, in the different states. If they're a big company that have various different practices, then your ability to negotiate, what you can ask from them, is different to what you will be able to ask an independent practice. And same goes for hospital doctors. So if you are coming into a very big trust compared to a smaller hospital in the district general area, so in the rural areas where it's a very small hospital, compared to if you're going to Sydney and you're going to be working in like a huge one of their big hospitals, what you will be able to ask under those circumstances is going to be different, because an independent firm, a smaller hospital, rural-based hospital, is not going to be able to give you as much as a bigger institution. So that's one of the very first things to consider before you start to negotiate. And that being said, is one of the mistakes I made when I was applying to come out to Australia, is I wasn't aware that female GPs are, for want of a better word, gold dust. There are fewer female GPs, and most patients, including males sometimes, want to see a female doctor. And so automatically that gave me a better leeway to be able to negotiate. So I want to place an emphasis on that word, negotiate. Don't just accept what it is that they give you. If they give you a job and say, we'll give you however many thousands for you to relocate, just either by yourself or with your family, and this is however many hours that you have to work, and this is however many years you have to work for us, don't just say yes. Please don't just say yes. Negotiate, negotiate, negotiate. The ideal is for you to have a doctor who you know is in the same specialty as you out here in Australia, that you can speak to, that you can run your potential contract with, and they can say, look, they're trying to rip you off, or they're trying to make use of the fact that you don't know very much about the system, and you should be asking for such and such. That would be the ideal, but not everybody does have the same thing. If you are a GP, and because I can speak for what it's like to be a GP very confidently, please do reach out to me in the description box, and not in the description box, I mean the comment section. Put your email, put your details. I will reach out to you, and I can run some things through some aspects of your contract if you want to, but please negotiate. What it is that you want, you need to be able to ask them. If you want all of your weekends off every weekend of the month, you need to be able to ask, because the worst thing they can say is no, right? So you need to ask them what you want from them. Okay, so let's talk about some aspects of the contract that you might be offered. With an independent firm, they will be able to say, okay, come over, you'll work for us, and you'll get A, B, C, D. However, in comparison to a corporate, and that's a bigger firm that has many general practitioners, general practices all over, they will be able to give you a big lump sum. And I will be frank, let me just say, a lot of them will say to you, we'll give you 500,000 Australian dollars. If they don't offer that, don't take it. Don't take it because they can. However, those $500,000 will come with them saying to you, you have to work for us for 5 years. That's the standard practice here. And in those 5 years, very often you will not be able to work for any other general practice, or you will not be able to do any other work. Those 5 years are going to be totally devoted to you working for that company. So be careful when you see those $sign, those Australian $sign, and you get excited about all this money that you're going to get up front. Just know that what comes along with that is that you will not be able to work for any other firm. Okay? And together with that, what often happens with these corporate companies is that they will tell you how many weeks. Remember, you are still an independent contractor as a GP. Wherever you go, you're still going to be considered as an independent contractor. However, taking that sort of money with a corporate essentially indirectly makes you their employee, because they will tell you when you can take your holiday. They will tell you how many weeks of holiday that you can take at any one time. And if you are a doctor who's moved over from the US or from the UK or from wherever it is in the world, you might want to go back certain times of the year to see your family, spend Christmas with your family, spend summer holidays with your family. That corporate company that gave you 500,000 Australian dollars might say to you, you cannot go. And why? Because of that huge incentive that they've given to you. Okay? If you decide to walk out of that contract and walk out of that agreement and say, look, I cannot do this, I don't want to be told what to do, but by the same token, I'm still an independent practitioner, they will tell you pay the money back for however many years. So if it's a 5-year contract you signed and you decide to walk out at year 2, you will have to pay what the 3 remaining years that you didn't stay for. So you think if they gave you 500,000 for 5 years, that's 100,000 per year. So you'd have to pay 300,000 back. Now what happens is, very often we get so excited, right? Especially when we come from a country when those privileges are not, offered to us. Like in the UK, no surgery will give you thousands of pounds for you to come and work for them. No, that doesn't happen. So when we get that money, we're very excited and we use the fund and we go and deposit and we pay for a home up front. So when you get into this disagreement with this big corporate surgery and you want to walk away, you no longer want to be told what to do. You no longer want to be told when to take your holiday. You no longer want to be in a place where you don't have a say in how the practice is run, how you practice. You will be asked to pay that money back. And often you've already spent the money. So take that into account, please, when you consider moving to Australia. If it's a corporate company offering you lots of dollar signs, make sure that you're, number one, negotiating, but bearing in mind that 500,000, although you are a contractor, will still cause them to have a certain say on what you do, what you cannot do, and sometimes will lead to frustrations. So that is an independent practice, and remember, on top of that incentive, you will still be paid for however many patients you see. So out here in Australia, you get paid per patient, as opposed as in comparison to the United Kingdom, where doctors get paid an hourly rate. Here, the more patients you see, the more money you will earn. In the independent, smaller doctor practices, smaller surgeries, one of the things that is a benefit of working there is that you have more say in your practice. You can say whether you decide not to give certain medications, whether for you will not see certain patients, for example, you will not carry out pap smears. You have a bit more of a say in what you will and what you won't do. However, those smaller practices just do not have the financial capacity to give you big lump sums of money. But the fact that you are an independent contractor in those surgeries is a lot more respected. That means when you decide that you don't want to work for 3 months because you have to go to the US or you have to go to the UK, or being a doctor that has come from abroad, you want a certain time off because you still need to handle business wherever you've come from if you've not moved over completely, then the independent smaller practices will make more of an allowance for that. They could say to you, we want you to give us at least a month notice, or we want you to give us at least 3 months notice. You have more freedom for you to do what you want. Now, that doesn't mean to say that they will not give you a lump sum. Some of them will still offer you a lump sum. So, but it'd be in the range of maybe 60,000 Australian dollars for 3 years. It's much less. But just bear in mind, whenever you are taking a financial incentive for relocation, the company will certainly have some type of hold on you. Less so if it's an independent practice that is giving you a lump sum, because you're dealing with one-on-one people, with the other person one-on-one, and you can talk to one another, as opposed to if it's a big corporate, you have to go various chains along the hierarchy to speak to the person that is on top. So that's also an important thing to bear in mind. Now, I feel like in independent practices, there is the potential to earn more. In smaller practices, for example, what's been happening since the middle of 2022 is a lot of the surgeries in Queensland at least have decided to go mixed billing. And essentially what that means is a patient will come in and desire and want to see a doctor. So instead of it being bulk billed, and that's when the government will cover the cost of the patient being seen, and for that, if the government covers all the cost of the patient being seen, you will get paid $40, roughly $40 for the first 20 minutes with that patient. But what's happened since the middle of last year, a lot of these smaller independent practices have gone mixed billings. So the same patient that would have once come in and the entire cost be covered by the government, which was only $40, that patient will now be charged $80. So the government will cover them for $40 and the patient will pay for themselves for $40. So that means that the doctor is able to earn more. Okay, I know I put an emphasis on earnings, but it's important. It's important because it's an element of job satisfaction for a doctor. And as things go, as things increase, as lives change, as recession is threatened, if doctors are kept on the very basic minimum, we will just struggle just like anybody else. So that is very important. So in an independent practice, those changes can very easily be implemented. However, with a corporate company, when their business model is to continue with a certain way of practice, a certain way of billing patients, when changes happen, these corporate companies are very, very reluctant, in fact, can oppose to those changes. And so you as a doctor, you have to endure the decision of the CEO of that company to keep his or her business a certain way. And so you won't be able to earn any more, even though the standard practice or the standard trend or the common trend in that season is for things to change so that doctors can earn and be paid more, which is perfectly legal, and it's, you know, it's approved by the government. It's nothing that is not appropriate. And so with the mixed billing system that is happening now in Australia, especially being implemented by the smaller surgeries, you see less patients, but you get paid just the same as if you were bulk billing, or even more. Now, some surgeries that are in very remote areas, or there aren't enough doctors in those areas, those surgeries will still be seeing the same amount of patients, but earning more, because remember, the patient is paying a subsidy of $40, as well as the government paying another $40. Okay, so if you see the same amount of patients, so say for example you were seeing 35 patients or 40 patients, now that you're in a mixed billing system, you will be earning more as a doctor. And so that's something that's very significant for you to consider when you decide whether you're going to go with this big corporate that's going to give you this big lump sum that sounds very attractive and with which you're planning to use the money to pay off your mortgage. You have to consider that for those 5 years, that corporate is going to be stuck in their ways of doing things, even when things change, even when the ways change to better general practice, both for the doctors and for the patients. So please bear that in mind also. The changes are less likely to be implemented with big corporate firms. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment on the comment section below. That way more people can come across this content and this video can be recommended to more people, so that more people can be empowered, educated, and, you know, come into the notion of some of the things that I talk about on here on this channel. Thank you as you do so. One of the things that I felt I was particularly frustrated by when I was working in the UK as a GP was the limitations that was imposed on GPs in terms of our ability to investigate. So GPs weren't able to request CT scans and MRI scans, and some other investigations which I cannot remember right now. But here in Australia, GPs have more autonomy. In fact, some referrals to the hospitals for specialist input into the patient's care would be rejected unless certain investigations have been done. These investigations we could not do in the UK. So when you're thinking of coming to Australia, you also have to remember that I would say there's a little bit of an increase in the amount of responsibility you're expected to take as a GP. For example, when I moved over here in 2020, I had not done anything to do with antenatal care apart from the theories that I learned to do the exams and the OSCEs, and obviously what we learned at medical school. When I came over here, I was told, I was faced with a rude awakening that I am the antenatal care for every pregnant patient of mine until 20 weeks. So, sorry, let me retract. I am the antenatal care for every non-complicated pregnancy until 20 weeks. So doctors have to do more. GPs are expected to do more. We also suture. GPs out here in Australia suture. GPs out here in Australia deal with a lot of skin cancer issues. And so GPs take on a bit more of a hands-on role in general practice, especially in the rural areas of Australia. So that's another thing to bear in mind. If you are thinking that your day-to-day practice in the UK and the standard model of general practice in the UK will automatically translate here, you have to consider the fact that you will have to adapt your practice. You will have to upscale your skills. For example, a lot of GPs here do minor surgeries. That's their bread and butter. And in the UK, that's not necessarily true. GPs, yes, they do minor surgeries, but it's in a different setting. And it's not very common here. It is extremely common for GPs to do minor surgeries. Another thing that's quite exciting for doctors who are contemplating moving to Australia is that going into private practice in Australia is easier, in my opinion, than in the UK. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, there is a general trend of late of mixed billing. So the government provides a subsidy for every patient, and the patient is expected to provide a subsidy also. And private GP practices, I find, are a lot more common here in Australia than they are in the UK, which is a plus if you were considering going down that route. However, if that is the case and you're coming from the UK, where some skills like suturing or minor surgery or and providing antenatal care is something that you've lost along the way and you've become de-skilled with, I would encourage, if you're considering coming over to Australia, for you to take up those skills again, because you will certainly be needed. Those skills will certainly be needed, and your ability to move into private practice will certainly be diminished if you don't have those skills. And when you are thinking of coming to Australia, you must remember that you get paid per patient, and so the more patients you're able to see, the better it is for you. You will earn more naturally. However, it is better, as I said, to go into a mixed billing practice rather than a bulk billing practice, because both with a mixed billing practice, you get paid by the government and you get paid by the patient themselves. And in Australia, the more you're able to build your patient base, and so the more patients that you have coming to ask for you as a doctor, the better off it is for you. And so in Australia, I found that patients are extremely loyal, extremely loyal. I've had patients that have come to look for me and they've come to look for other colleagues of mine. And when I've not been in, or my colleague has not been in, that patient who may be very, very sick may decide not to see any other doctor until their own doctor is back, which is obviously not clinically ideal for that patient, but it's to illustrate the point that patients are extremely loyal to their doctor, and so you're able to build that relationship with the patient and become their doctor. And as you become that one patient's doctor, they'll bring their whole family to see you, and you build up a patient following quite easily, depending on your bedside manner, of course. And so one thing to consider, if you're not a people's person, if you don't like to engage in one-on-one relationships with an individual, then Australia is not the place for you, because patients will come asking for you. They will expect you to follow them up. They will expect you to follow up even their whole family. And so that's important to keep in mind and to consider when coming to Australia. And one final thing to consider when you are thinking of moving over to Australia and thinking of coming over to become a GP, most importantly, because it's the one I know, or even any other specialty, just know and decide whether you are going to be willing to move to a rural area. Okay, so there is a principle here in Australia that if you are a non-Australian trained doctor, there is a restriction on you for you not to be able to practice in the areas, cosmopolitan areas that are central, areas that don't have a great need for doctors, where everyone wants to gravitate to because it's a city, it's hip, and it's where everyone wants to be. So when you are a non-Australian trained doctor, the government has imposed a rule where you have to work in the areas of need, and that's any area that the government decides is in a need. It has less doctors, basically. Simply put, that area does not have enough doctors, and so these are the only areas where you'll be able to work for 10 years, unless you are willing to work in the Aboriginal centres, okay, where often you'll get paid a salary as opposed to being paid per patient. Unless you're willing to work in an Aboriginal centre, you will not be able to work in the city, okay? So that means more and more the doctors that are coming over from abroad are being made to work in rural areas, which in and of itself is not a bad thing, because working in the rural areas, you can earn more. So you just have to ask yourself, am I willing to be a doctor that works out in the rural areas where often you might not see any human being for very, very, very many miles, okay? So you have to be prepared mentally, if you're moving to Australia, to realize that that might be your reality that you might not be able to work in the city, but work out in the rural areas for a long time by yourself? Do you come over by yourself? Do you move with your family? Do you leave your family in the country, wherever it is that you've come from, to try it out first and then bring them along? You have to think around those things. If you want to earn more, you have to be willing to come out of a comfort zone and go out in the rural areas. I think I've covered them all. If there's anything, if you are a doctor who has moved out here from another country, please comment down here if I've left anything else. If you've moved to Australia, if there was some things that you wish you had considered before coming, please put them in a comment section so that we can all learn, and so that, you know, a doctor who's thinking about coming to Australia can be empowered before coming out here. And yes, let's all learn together and let's help one another to make the best decisions. Thank you for watching, and I see you in the next video.